The airbag is deployed and injure the driver. It's happened at least 4 times already. The recall covers certain Frontier small pickups, Titan large pickups, and Xterra, Pathfinder, and Armada SUVs from 2008 through 2011, and Quest minivans from 2008 and 2009. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Attention investors, Century 21 Realty Management is proud to present an investment opportunity you have to look at. Ladera Towers Condominium provides luxury living centrally located in Manila with access to the entire island. Ladera Towers has 3-bedroom condominium units available now. See them before they're all gone. 4-bedroom units sold out. This investment is only going to appreciate in value. Call now, Century 21 Realty Management, the number 647-5003, or visit laderatowerguam.com or guamproperties.com.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
Wishing you a happy, healthy, and prosperous new year from your friends at Security Title. As we clean house for the new year, this is an excellent time to make sure the title to your land is also in order. It doesn't matter if you own a ranch in Inarajan, a house in Dededo, or a hotel in Tumon. Keeping the ownership clear promotes peace in the family and can avoid future misunderstandings. When it comes to your family property, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What a great way to start a radio program, Jose.
Absolutely, every day.
Yeah. It puts everybody out there in our international radio listening audience on notice that this radio show pays a certain amount of attention to the Constitution, individual freedom, liberty, patriotism, apple pie too, right? Yeah, all of those things. So here we are in another episode of Tall Tales. I'm going to start out with Demi Cutney, except that it looks like someone trying to get into the green room, Jose.
Kind of the phones are resetting, but we'll get to you. So don't go away.
It is a caller, huh? Yeah. Okay, well, let me jump into Jimmy Cutney, and maybe the phones will straighten out by that time, huh? Here's the Daily News editorial. Our view, tourism recovery underway. Guam needs to get ready. All signs are pointing to tourism rebound this year, according to island leaders and industry experts who have been sharing their optimism since the beginning of the year. Most recently, Fish Eye Marine Park General Manager Akira Tani told the PDN he is confident the island will see more Japanese tourists. Once they start coming back, it's going to be very steady and it's going to increase in numbers, which is a good thing, Tani said. The question is, are we ready? Tani and others pointed to issues we need to address effectively to effectively compete with other regional destinations. A big one is that there are fewer attractions due to pandemic closures. The number of places tourists can visit or tourists can enjoy some activity, that's much less. It's reduced a lot. Tani told the Daily News, for some businesses, it's a chicken or the egg problem. Tourists may not choose Guam as a destination if they see fewer attractions. But businesses can't open or expand offerings until there are tourism dollars to sustain operations. Which came first, Jose, the chicken or the egg?
I got to censor myself.
Uh-huh.
The rooster.
The rooster. Okay. Talafofo Falls Resort and Park is only open 3 days a week because visitors' arrivals are still not good enough to open the park every day. Manager Kimberly Kim told the PDN. There are some bright spots in this area, including the return of debut village festivals, including Inalahan's Magalahi Gadao Guput Chamorro Festival this weekend. And since the proposal for a smart park at Ipoh has been quashed, it remains to be seen what the Visitors Bureau will do with the $20 million and Federal American Rescue Plan funding that was initially meant to be used as seed money for the project. Some have suggested using the funds to address another challenge to attracting and maintaining tourism numbers, cleaning and improving public restroom facilities. Well, how many years have we been talking about that, huh?
Too many.
Yeah.
You know, Japan doesn't have a problem with that.
No.
But we do.
We do. There's a lot of parks and recreational areas that are under repair. More than need to go back online, said Acting Governor Josh Tenorio. I see this as a good year to focus on those efforts and get everybody back to work. Daily News says, we agree. A good start would be the Visitors Bureau to end its current infighting so that we can focus on addressing issues and eventually get everybody back to work. We talked about this before. It just isn't the way it works.
It's not GVB.
There are serious issues that have to be sorted out. And until the issues are sorted out, the infighting will not end. They're not fighting because they like to fight. They're fighting because they have positions that they're maintaining. And sooner or later, somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. And then the infighting will end. This can't we all just get along, Rodney King type approach doesn't work very well in organizations, especially ones with diverse, I said it, Jose, diverse memberships like the Visitors Bureau. Okay, I guess our caller gave up, huh?
No, that was for something else. This is our station is the go-to number, I guess, for anyone wanting to get information of this family of broadcasters here. So, but I sent her to the right place.
Oh, okay, good.
But I'm interested in picking your brain on this, Bob. Do we really think it's GVB who's going to save tourism, or do we need to change the mindset of our island? Like I said, at DOE during the oversight meeting, there is a low morale feeling going on. And the only reason why bathrooms and parks and every place gets trashed, because there's a low morale problem in the community. And that's what needs to get fixed. I don't think putting on lipstick, what do they say, lipstick on a pig, is going to help anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right, Jose, that in fact, I found what I was looking for the other day. And here it is. And this taps in exactly to what you're talking about. With public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. Consequently, he who molds public sentiment goes deeper than he who enacts statutes or pronounces decisions. He makes statutes and decisions possible or impossible to be executed. This was Abraham Lincoln in the Lincoln-Douglas debates, Ottawa, Illinois, August 21, 1858. So public sentiment is just in the wrong place.
It's not money.
No. It's public sentiment. And when the community got its head if a community gets its head on the right, straightened out here, then we won't have people going to the restrooms just to trash them. Yeah, it's not. It's a sickness in our society that causes these things. You know, every time I drive past downtown Dadido, it's so disappointing. They built that skate park and that nice fence, and people just broke the fence apart just to have something to do, apparently. And of course, no one's ever going to. Certainly, the mayor is not going to fix it. No one's ever going to fix it, and it looks awful. It just horrible. And when I see it, my morale goes down, Jose. Yeah, but that's a good point. Okay, let's see what we got on the card here for today. Of course, we start out with systemic racism and Public Law 36-34. And then we've got the Carl plus Lohan plus Tello Brown and Brown versus Sam Shinohara. And after that, Michael Matt versus the FBI. And 20 state attorneys general versus the FBI also. And we've got the Moylans versus the Wheel. Troy versus the Consigliere. Won't versus liability. The New Republic magazine versus Ron DeSantis. Ass Press. Oh, I made that same mistake yesterday, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
Yeah. Versus Fino English. And we got DeSantis versus Disney, etc. So starting out with the whole Guam Visitors Bureau kerfuffle, which has now gotten to be a pretty thick sheaf of papers. You know, we've had canceled meetings, canceled oversight hearings, allegations of impropriety, allegations of violations of the open government law, etc. And when it all comes down to is an argument or disagreement over the role of the Guam Visitors Bureau board. And the Carl brought this matter to a head last May when he said there are members on the Visitors Bureau board who have conflicts of interest because they're using their positions to feather their own nests. And he said that the open government law has been violated. Counsel Joe McDonald was tasked with determining how the bylaws of the corporation match up with statute. And the answer is not so hot. And McDonald did a nice workup there, drafted amendments to the bylaws that would conform with statute. And that's as far as we've gotten, because the Visitors Bureau can't muster up a quorum in order to amend the bylaws. And so the matter is not settled at all, notwithstanding the Daily News tone deafness on the whole subject. So the latest news is, you know, that there was a board meeting scheduled for last Monday, and a directors meeting for the afternoon. Those were canceled after the oversight hearing was canceled on Friday. The latest thing is that the Carl has scheduled a meeting for directors on February 24 at 10 o'clock in the morning. So we'll see how that goes. Other than that, I guess the real news on the Visitors Bureau board and the president is that there is no new news today for the first time in several days. Okay, going on, the next item on the card, we're going national here for a few minutes. This is Michael Matt versus the FBI. Now, I suspect very few people know who Michael Matt is. And I'm going to tell you that Michael Matt is one of the guys in the mainland that is really on our side. He has a show that you can watch on YouTube called The Remnant. So go to YouTube and Google Michael Matt or Google The Remnant. It's there. He puts out a newspaper and some other stuff. And he also is the prime mover behind the Catholic Identity Conference held every fall. I've been to, I can't remember, it's 3 or 4. And it is excellent. So if you want to be hooked up with and in touch with real Catholics who don't sign up for all of the modernization that's come into the Catholic Church, real doctrinaire Catholics, conservatives, folks that believe in, I think, almost all of the same things that I believe in, so he's got to be right, Jose. That guy's name is Michael Matt, and he does very good videos on TV at the site I mentioned to you. And it's, well, if you don't know Michael Matt, he is certainly worthy of your acquaintance. So he puts out a newspaper, and he puts out an email service, and this is what's been on the calendar for a few days. The other mainstream media have finally caught up with Michael Matt. And here's what he says. The Federal Bureau of Investigation rescinded a report on radical traditionalist Catholic ideology on Thursday. Now, this came out on February 10. Former FBI agents condemned the document for citing the Southern Poverty Law Center, a left-wing smear factory infamous for branding mainstream conservative and Christian organizations hate groups and placing them on a map with the KKK chapters. Quote, while our standard practice is to not comment on specific intelligence products, this particular field office product, disseminated only within the FBI regarding racially or ethnically motivated violent extremism, does not meet the exacting standards of the FBI. The FBI told the Daily Signal in a statement emailed Thursday. Upon learning of the document, FBI headquarters quickly began taking action to remove the document from FBI systems and conducted a review of the basis for the document, the Bureau added. The FBI is committed to sound analytic tradecraft and to investigating and preventing acts of violence and other crimes while upholding the constitutional rights of all Americans, and will never conduct investigative activities or open an investigation based solely on First Amendment protected activity, except when they do, right? So that's from the FBI. Here's Michael's comment. That this FBI has been rescinded comes as no surprise. It was based on a 2007 fundraising campaign by one Heidi Byrick of the Southern Poverty Law Center entitled Radical Catholic Traditionalists. Now, if you go to Michael at The Remnant or on YouTube tonight, you'll see Ms. Heidi Byrick and some of the things she said. Where The Remnant is concerned, I have successfully debunked the findings of that SPLC fundraiser more than once, and to the satisfaction of the left-leaning news organizations that had initially taken it seriously, including City Pages and WCCO TV reporter Heather Brown. The SPLC's credibility has since been called into question by John Stossel, the Weekly Standard, National Review, Judicial Watch, Tall Tales, and others. At best, this FBI report is an honest mistake. At worst, it is a politically motivated witch hunt foiled by a whistleblower. If the latter is the case, then this is worthy of the anti-Catholic Know-Nothing Party of the 1850s. The SPLC made headlines some years ago when domestic terrorist Floyd Corkins, who had carried out a politically motivated shooting at the Family Research Council, admitted that he'd gotten his target list from the SPLC, Southern Poverty Legal Conference. I'm going to do something, Jose. I'm going to find out what their email address is, and I'm going to write to them and ask them to put my show on their list, their terrorist list.
It's about time.
Yeah. I can't think of a better badge of honor than being on the wrong side of those clowns. Simply put, the FBI report is based on fake news, and all the SPLC has been peddling this fake news for 16 years. They have yet to unearth a single example of any violence or threats of violence coming from a traditional Catholic individual or organization. And back to the Southern Poverty Leadership Center. You know, their founder is a guy named Morris Dees. They had to fire him because he wouldn't go along with this stuff. So they had to fire their founder.
Wow. They certainly are impoverished.
They are. Okay, going on here. As a traditional Catholic newspaper publisher whose family has been in the Catholic press apostolate for 150 years, that's Michael Matt's father, Michael Matt's grandfather. He's not new to the game. I vehemently protest this reckless behavior, basing anything on the SPLC's notorious hate-mongering, and I encourage every fair-minded Christian of all denominations to do the same thing. In response to the FBI's about-face, former agent and whistleblower Kyle Seraphin, now there's a good name, huh?
How ironic.
Kyle Seraphin tweeted, "The FBI doesn't confirm information, but they confirmed this because they were called out, not because they would never approve it. They approved it and are embarrassed. This is the only way out." Okay, and then I have a letter dated February 10th, written on the stationery of the Commonwealth, the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And it goes like this. It's addressed to Merrick Garland, United States Attorney General, and Christopher Wray, the Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And it says this: "We are chief legal officers of our respective states, charged not only with enforcing the law, but also with securing the civil rights of our citizens. We write with outrage and alarm to address the anti-Catholic internal memorandum produced by the FBI's Richmond Field Office on January 23, which was released to the public this week. The FBI must immediately and unequivocally order agency personnel not to target Americans based on their religious beliefs and practices. We also demand that the FBI produce publicly all materials relating to the memorandum and its production. If there is any fixed star in our constitutional constellation, it's that no official, high or petty, can prescribe what shall be orthodox in religion." In other words, no government official can rule on the truth or falsity, reality, or whatever of any religious belief.
Unless you're the Guam DPHSS.
Yes, and then you can forbid the celebration of any sacraments, yeah. And there's a footnote here citing a 1943 Supreme Court case, West Virginia State Board of Education versus Barnett. for that proposition that no state official can rule on the legitimacy of a religious belief. Cannot do it.
And sad to say, that's probably why, I forget which state it is, that there is a satanic temple who's now converted into an abortion clinic. Talk about a terrorist group.
Yeah, but unfortunately,
they can't be tested.
Yeah, they're really the validity of their religion cannot be tested. So this country was founded on the right of all people to worship in church, mosque, synagogue, or of their choice, free from government interference. Countless millions were drawn to our country because of that very right. Indeed, some of our first states were founded as safe havens for religious dissenters. There is no right more sacred to American democracy than the right to worship freely. We are horrified to learn that at least one field office of the FBI apparently does not agree with this proposition. Anti-Catholic bigotry appears to be festering in the FBI, and the Bureau is treating Catholics as potential terrorists because of their belief. On Wednesday, the public learned of an internal memorandum produced by the FBI's Richmond field office. The memorandum identifies, quote, radical traditionalist Catholics as potentially racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists. The memorandum deploys alarmingly detailed theological distinctions to distinguish between the Catholics whom the FBI deems acceptable and those it does not. Among those beliefs which distinguish the bad Catholics from the good ones are a preference for, quote, the traditional Latin Mass and pre-Vatican II teachings. So if you are a TLM guy and you think Vatican II was a horrible mistake, you too could be a terrorist, Jose.
T-shirts coming out soon.
I mean, this is
it's
what
incredible.
They did. It is incredible. And adherence to traditional Catholic teachings on sex and marriage, which the memorandum glibly describes as anti-LGBTQ. Now, I have my explanation for what these people use for a thought process, and I'll get to that. In other words, unless you're pro-LGBTQ, you're a suspect as far as the Richmond office is concerned. The memorandum even appears to accuse the Supreme Court and Governor of Virginia of catalyzing the bad Catholics through legislation or judicial decisions in areas such as abortion rights, immigration, affirmative action, and LGBT. In other words, unless you're way out on the hard left, you're on the FBI's watch list. You too could be a terrorist. Singling out the Supreme Court's recent decision in Dobbs and Governor Youngkin's support for sensible abortion regulations as examples. After defining which Catholics are the dangerous ones, the memorandum proposes dealing with those Catholics through the development of sources with access. Development of sources with access, including in places of worships. Let's send spies into the church, into these Latin masses.
You know how I know they're spies on our mass? when they repeat, and also with you. A little inside humor.
Yeah. Singling out the Supreme Court's recent decision, as you were, including, in other words, the memorandum proposes recruiting Catholics to enter a sacred house of worship, talk to their fellow Catholics, and report those conversations back to the FBI so that the federal government can keep tabs on bad Catholics. To allocate these sources, the document includes an appendix with a list of Catholic hate groups that was assembled by the Southern Poverty Law Center, apparently without any independent vetting from the FBI. After the American public learned of the memorandum, the Bureau apparently emailed a smattering of reporters to inform them that FBI headquarters quickly began taking action to remove the document from FBI systems and conduct a review of the basis for the document. The Bureau's action occurred only in response to public outrage over the memorandum, which the FBI never intended the public to see. Had the memorandum not been revealed to the public, it would still be an intelligence product available to the Bureau. Second Amendment, anyone? You know, one of the theories is that this was to counteract the idea the United States was to have a standing army. So if the government got out of control, we'd have an armed citizenry to put them back in their place. Here you go.
I have an idea why. Again, this might be inside baseball. They heard that we're the church militant.
Yeah. Suffice to say that we are not preceded by the FBI's damage control efforts, and that's all they were. The FBI's scrubbing of the document from its systems and its purported review of the process that created it in no way reassures us that this memorandum does not reflect a broader program of secretive surveillance of American Catholics or other religious adherents and infiltration of their houses of worship. It assures us only that the FBI is embarrassed at the public revelation of the memorandum's contents. And the memorandum's target of Catholics because they prefer to pray in the ancient liturgical language of the Church, and the tactics it proposes for dealing with those Catholics harkens back to some of the worst chapters of our past. This country has a sordid history of discrimination against Catholics. An entire political party, the Know-Nothings, formed in the 1850s to decrease political immigrant influence of immigrants and Catholics. Groups that were often interchangeable given the rise of German and Irish immigration in the 19th century, and gained hundreds of seats in federal and state government. A few decades later, in the 1870s, our Constitution was nearly amended to prohibit states from aiding sectarian schools. That was the so-called Blaine Amendment. James G. Blaine. I'd rather be right than president. And if you want to see what the Blaine Amendment looks like, go to our Organic Act, because the language of the Blaine Amendment is included in our Organic Act. Yeah. It goes much farther than the Second Amendment goes. And Blaine wanted this to be a constitutional amendment. And let's hang on here for a second. Take a short break.
Chili's has just rolled out the best version yet of the 3 for $15 meal deal. Mix and match your choice of beverage and starter with the largest selection of entrees. Enjoy crowd favorite dishes like the honey chipotle chicken crispers with rice, bacon ranch quesadillas, or the juicy Santa Fe burger. There's so many combinations to choose from that you might have to three-peat to try them all. So come on down and make your own 3 for $15 meal deal at Chili's. More life and great value happen here.
Wishing you a happy, healthy, and prosperous new year from your friends friends at Security Title. As we clean house for the new year, this is an excellent time to make sure the title to your land is also in order. It doesn't matter if you own a ranch in Inarajan, a house in Dedido, or a hotel in Tumon. Keeping the ownership clear promotes peace in the family and can avoid future misunderstandings. When it comes to your family property, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So here we go again. And here's how the Blaine Amendment read. This was a proposed amendment to the United States Constitution. No state shall make any law respecting establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, and no money raised by taxation in any state for the support of public schools or derived from any public fund therefore, nor any public lands devoted thereto, shall ever be under the control of any religious sect, nor shall any money so raised or land so devoted be divided between religious sects or denominations. Now, our Organic Act reads sort of like that. Can't use public money for anything dealing with religion. Causing, smart asses like me to say, so there shouldn't be any public streets that lead to churches.
School buses for the schools.
Any public streets that lead to churches.
Mm-hmm.
If a church catches on fire, too bad.
Can't use any public facilities.
You can't use
no hydrants.
No hydrants, no fire trucks, etc. If you see a burglar breaking into a Catholic school, yeah. So and it is so overbearing and goes so far and so unnecessary since we have a First Amendment. But, when the Organic Act was drafted in 1950, we have our own equivalent of the Blaine Amendment in our Organic Act. Now, recent Supreme Court cases, especially the one dealing with whether or not, I can't remember which state it came from, but whether or not ground up pieces of rubber could be furnished to religious schools for use on their playgrounds. That ban, if that was it's not constitutional. So the Blaine Amendment is pretty much a dead letter now. But that was the thinking. And and of course we go way past it now with we will furnish sectarian textbooks to religious schools. If we're using Jose's basic mathematics text in the public schools, and any religious school wants them, we'll lend them to the religious schools. And buses can haul kids to private schools as well as public schools. Kids don't get a whole lot of indoctrination on buses, probably not as much as they need. It was, a few decades later in the 1870s, our Constitution was nearly amended to prohibit states from aiding sectarian schools. It was an open secret that sectarian was code for Catholic. This amendment was born of bigotry and arose at the time of pervasive hostility to the Catholic Church and to Catholics in general. When the federal amendment failed, dozens of states adopted these amendments in their own constitution. And this discrimination did not end in the 19th century. Just a few decades ago, the Ku Klux Klan, more infamous for its vicious campaign of wanton violence against Black Americans in the South, also targeted religious minorities such as Jews and Catholics. The targeting of Catholics for treatment as violent extremists because of language in which they pray or because of the beliefs to which they subscribe is unacceptable, unconstitutional, and deeply un-American. It is particularly concerning that this memorandum originated in Virginia. Virginia is the birthplace of religious freedom in America and has a proud history of protecting the right to worship, free from government interference or intimidation. Shortly after independence, Virginia enacted Thomas Jefferson's Bill for Establishing Religious Freedom, which decreed that no man shall be restrained, molested, or burdened, or otherwise suffer an account of his religious opinion or beliefs. When former colonies came together to draft the Bill of Rights, they included the first and foremost that the new federal government should make no law which prohibited the free exercise of religion. That foundational protection of those beliefs nearest and dearest to persons of faith extends to all sincere beliefs, whether or not those beliefs may be considered acceptable. Second, spying on Catholics in their churches and cathedrals is an absurd use of law enforcement and counterintelligence resources. And they go on to explain why that is. So this is just page 4 of about a 9-page memorandum signed by the attorneys general of 20 different states. And I say, good on them. It's unfortunate that Doug didn't get a chance to sign this, but I suspect that he's probably with it in spirit. Now, I'm going to explain why I think that these FBI agents went so far off the rails on this one, but I'm going to take a short break first.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. No services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Yeah, so I just want to talk a little bit about the foundations of the American ideal of what a country should be about. And I start out with the Declaration of Independence. And the first sentence in the second paragraph reads like this. I'm sure everybody's heard this over and over again. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think you've all heard that before. Now, notice it doesn't say endowed by the government, endowed by the Creator. So the folks on the left will give you arguments about this, but there's no question whatsoever that when the United States was created, it was a Christian nation. And it was a Christian nation right up until the events of 1922 began to erode that Christianity. So, Creator, I suppose, for most people means God. And an awful lot of people in the United States believe that there is a God. I do. I suspect my friend Jose does also. A lot of people believe there is no God. And this is probably the fundamental division in thought between the people in this country. even more fundamental than red and blue, Democrat and Republican, liberal or conservative, whatever. Because if you don't believe in God, all kinds of things are possible. And I got some scholarship here that I want to read into the record. So if you believe in God, it's God, not man, not government, not popular opinion, not a democratic vote, is the source of our rights. All men are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Now, this relates back to something else, and that is if you read the Old Testament, I've read some of it, I really wish I knew more about it than what I do, because there's so much there. But the Old Testament, the only Bible that Jesus knew, which is frequently cited, introduced the most revolutionary moral idea in history. The most revolutionary moral idea in history. That there are objective moral truths just as there are mathematical and scientific truths. A mathematical truth, before the wokesters came around, 2 + 2 = 4. That's a mathematical truth. The ratio between the diameter of a circle and its circumference is 3.1416, blah, blah, on forever, right? Pi, right? Pi r squared. That is a mathematical truth. Water under standard pressure boils at 212 degrees. That is a scientific truth. Now, this radical idea that comes from the Old Testament is that there are moral truths just as there are mathematical and scientific truths. But those moral truths depend on God as their source. If there are no moral standards, then there is no moral truth. There are only moral opinions. And that's exactly where we are, and that's exactly where the FBI guys are. There are no moral truths, there are only moral opinions. A moral opinion: a woman has a right to do with her own body whatever she wants to. Hell with a baby. That is a moral opinion. It's not a moral truth. You go on, because there are moral truths, good and evil are the same for all people. There are different standards. God, not man, not popular opinion, not a democratic vote is the source of our rights. And a human being is created in the image of God. Therefore, every human life is precious. Therefore, race is of no significance, since we are all created in God's image and God has no race. And man is not basically good. Christians speak of original sin in referring to man's sinful nature. Jews cite God himself in Genesis. The will of man's heart is evil from his youth. They are not identical beliefs, but they are both worlds apart from the naive Enlightenment belief that man is basically good, and they come to the same conclusion. We need God-based rules to keep us from our natural inclination to do evil. And I reached this conclusion when I was a very young man, that man is not naturally good. That if you start out and look at it from an anthropological standpoint, man is a mammal. A tiger is a mammal. A lion is a mammal. And all mammals are governed by similar instincts. The two strongest instincts for all mammals, Number one, self-preservation, no matter what it takes. Number two, propagation of the race, creating more mammals. And lions, tigers, whatever, mammals can do this with carefree abandon. They don't need any education. It just comes naturally, and it comes natural to humans. So in order for humans to restrain those two natural instincts, they need something else. And and that's where that moral code comes in. That's why we pay attention to a moral code. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, etc. And then finally, human beings have free will. In the secular world, that is the godless world, the one that we are now slapped in the face with every single day of the week, there is no free will because all human behavior is attributed to biology and environment. You know, the whole race baiting thing, etc. So if you bear with me here from so far on what I've been talking about, it's called the Judeo-Christian values, and it's I think most people are unconsciously aware of these things, and they just follow those things that I mentioned. But the godless ones, the ones who've been corrupted by cultural Marxism and neo-Marxism, the ones on the left, the ones that have no belief in a creator, then their only moral code is relativism. And that's where we see all of this stuff. That's where we see stuff like this, relativism. It's impossible to separate our choice of whether and when to have children from every other choice in our lives. That is relativism. So these FBI guys, when they were drafting up this letter as to, what we should do about violent terrorists, they were just following their own idea of what's common sense. It's their own beliefs. Of course they know what to do, how to find terrorists. Find these Catholics, these traditional Catholics, because even the Southern Poverty Law Center says these guys are terrorists. So what more do you need? Okay, let me see who I've got in the green room here. Senator Duenas on childbearing. Good afternoon, Honorable Senator, former minority leader, regular caller to Tall Tales, tailgater, and appreciator of the host of Tall Tales. How are you this afternoon?
Awesome. Since you reversed it on me, I'm going to try something 50 with our tailgaters here.
Uh-huh.
It was interesting that Vanessa Williams says that it is impossible to make those decisions on whether to have a baby or to go to the movie. I was interested. There's back and forth on whether Rihanna, the performer at the Super Bowl's performance, was good, bad, or indifferent. But it's obvious that she had no problem making that decision because the premier thing that she wanted to do is to portray that she is having her second child by making the feature of her whole performance her baby in the womb. I thought that was interesting. She completely defied Vanessa Williams' position that it's impossible to make decisions because I'm sure she was picked to do that performance well before she knew that she was with child.
That's true. That's true. And, of course, if you follow the Vanessa Williams doctrine, I'm going to do the performance. No harm, no foul. I'll just abort the baby. Not a problem.
So that I could gyrate on the floor and do all the other performances that a normal artist would do in such a prestigious event. So I made that observation myself by saying, good on you.
Gotta go,
Good on you, buddy.
gotta go, Chris. Good, very good
Take care, my
point.
friend.
Thank you, sir.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
An objects shoot-down briefing. I'm Jack Callahan. Fox News given behind closed doors Tuesday to members of the U.S. Senate about the objects the administration has ordered shot down in the last week. Several senators say it raised more questions than it answered.
Despite learning that these aerial objects are not believed to be alien in nature, still the who, what, and the when remains unclear. And yet President Biden still has not addressed the nation about how the U.S. is going to continue to respond to this apparently growing threat. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre tells Fox News that the president has nothing to share.
Fox's Kevin Corke. The president did share his thoughts on Monday's shootings at Michigan State University, calling again for a ban on so-called assault weapons and high-capacity ammunition clips.
There is no rationale for assault weapons and magazines that hold 50, 70 bullets.
The MSU gunman Anthony McRae used a handgun to kill 3 students and wound 5 others and then take his own life. Motive still unknown. Michigan State has canceled all classes through the end of the week. A week after being allowed back into their homes after a train derailment spewed toxic chemicals into their town, residents of East Palestine, Ohio report odors, headaches, sore throats, and dying animals, despite assurances from the EPA that tests show the air is safe. Ohio's Governor Mike DeWine.
I would be drinking the bottled water, and I would be continuing to find out what the tests were showing as far as the air. I would be alert and concerned.
Residents say they can't get any answers from the EPA. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is being criticized for not saying anything about the accident until 10 days after it happened, and then only issuing a statement. America is listening to Fox News.
Every company needs money to grow and take on the challenges 2023 will bring.
That's why Bank Pacific's commercial loan officers stand ready to help you.
We offer several programs tailored to assist companies to get to the next step or perhaps for a startup,
including working with SBA or GITA.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches.
Bank Pacific.
We want to be your partner.
Equal opportunity lender. Member FDIC.
Credit conditions apply.
Wishing you a happy, healthy, and prosperous new year from your friends at Security Title. As we clean house for the new year, this is an excellent time to make sure the title to your land is also in order. It doesn't matter if you own a ranch in Inarajan, a house in Dededo, or a hotel in Tumon. Keeping the ownership clear promotes peace in the family and can avoid future misunderstandings. When it comes to your family property, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Charges have been filed against the man accused of plowing over pedestrians in Brooklyn, New York Monday.
62-year-old Wang Soor facing charges of second-degree murder and 7 counts of attempted murder. New York City police say Soor was behind the wheel of a rented U-Haul truck, driving recklessly Monday, hitting 8 people who were riding e-bikes, scooters, and a moped. The incidents happening at different locations as he drove erratically through Bay Ridge, Sunset Park, and Red Hook, Brooklyn, with police in pursuit. Investigators say Soor also rammed a police cruiser, giving the officer minor injuries. The violent rampage left a 44-year-old man dead and another in a medically induced coma. Others that were hit are in stable condition.
Lisa Evers of Fox 5 in New York reports the man's family says he was off his meds. As the Russian invasion of Ukraine nears the 1-year mark, support in the U.S. for continuing weapons and economic assistance to the Ukrainians is softening. According to an AP NORC poll, 48% asked, saying they approve of the aid. That's down from 60% in May. Despite charges against its star, production is ready to resume on a controversial movie project.
Rust will resume resume production this spring with old and new crew members, including producer and star Alec Baldwin, according to The Hollywood Reporter. The plans to finish the film come as Baldwin faces charges for manslaughter, multiple lawsuits from former crew members, and an investigation into alleged systemic safety issues on set. In October of last year, cinematographer Helena Hutchins was shot after a prop gun held by Baldwin fired, killing her and wounding cinematographer Joel Souza. Baldwin said he never pulled the trigger and blamed it on the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, who faces similar charges. The cinematographer from American Horror Story will replace Hutchins. Michelle Polino, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Looking for a new home or that special place to spend your retirement? Century 21 Realty Management has the place for you. Ladera Towers Condominium in Manila. Luxury living you deserve. Amenities like a gourmet kitchen, a large jacuzzi tub, private lanai with a magnificent ocean view, and 24/7 security. Other amenities, large swimming pool, couple of tennis courts, 3-bedroom condo units are available right now. This is an opportunity you should look at now before they're all gone. Call us now at Century 21 Realty Management, 647-5003, or visit the website, LaderaTowerGuam.com or GuamProperties.com.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
So here we are again at the end of another big halftime show, and it's time for Jose to go into his usual "here's how you do it" speech.
And it goes like this. Point your browser to thepoint.gu, the official website of this radio station. Click on the picture with the beard of the T-shirt. It'll take you to the purveyor where you can order that shirt. When it comes in the mail, put it on, take a selfie, and send that selfie to the Point's WhatsApp at 671-797-8255, and we will be sure to include you in the Tall Tales I'm a Tailgater Rogues Gallery.
It's that simple, folks, and what a prize it is. Okay, let's move into the second half of Tall Tales here. Next item on the card is the Moylans versus the Wheel. And this is an article that ran in the Post. Attorney General Doug Moylan is hitting all angles to address the problem of visitors to Guam committing crimes. Over the weekend, Doug Moylan wrote a letter to Guam's delegate, James Moylan, Moylan to Moylan, following the conclusion of negotiations between the United States and the Federated States of Micronesia. Quote, "We respectfully request a copy of that draft treaty," Doug Moylan wrote to James Moylan, explaining that he would like to know how FSM citizens can be deported from Guam if they are accused and adjudicated of wrongdoing, misdemeanor or felony. We seek to work closely with you to establish efficient and effective measures to remove those undesirable lawbreakers if they attempt to come back into Guam, also to effectively prevent them from entry into Guam. Attorney General Moylan concluded in his letter. Following the release of the letter, the Post spoke with Doug Moylan, who confirmed Guam's delegate in the House of Representatives had received the letter. Yeah, well, Jim Moylan, that's pretty unusual for Jim Moylan to get into the news because he received the letter.
He did not know what to do.
He's ordinarily the writer of copious amounts of letters. Here's what Jim Moylan said. They did contact me and give me an update that no, they do not have the treaty sent over to them yet because there's no treaty yet. There's a memorandum of understanding. Treaties get ratified by the Senate. But from what it sounds like, they're very interested in making sure that both the governor and the attorney general's concerns are going to be addressed by the appropriate committees in Congress, Doug Moylan said. Guam's delegate, that would be Jim Moylan, confirmed a shared stance on the deportation criminals who are FSM citizens, saying the two are on the same page with the issue. So I guess if you turn to page M, an M up on top, Moylan, yeah, they're on the same page, right? As of this date, nothing has been submitted to the House Natural Resources Committee, and our office will be closely monitoring things as there are several items we would like to see included. Jim Moylan's spokesperson, Hannah Devanzo, told the Guam Daily Post. Who is Hannah Devanzo?
Well, we know she's not a Moylan.
Yeah, she's got that going for her. Doug Moylan explained the letter was a proactive effort to open up communication to ensure the AG's office voice is heard on the issue and that he is working on addressing it in several other ways. Some of those include communicating with U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Immigration and Customs Enforcement Division, which has identified 3 inmates ready to be deported. They're currently incarcerated at Department of Corrections. They're post-judgment cases, and I believe we're looking at 8 others with ICE orders to see if other individuals at DOC can be deported, stated Doug Moylan. He said his office is looking at supporting as we're sorting out deportation details in cases that are in their early stages before the court. The other efforts that we're doing is to identify those pre-judgment cases that are working their way to trial to set up parameters in order to see whether or not they want to take a plea agreement that we would deport them, but also put a bench warrant on them and have a judgment entered for maximum jail time if they attempted to come back into Guam, stated Doug Moylan, adding that his office is seeking to become designated by ICE to be involved in the deportation process. Jim Moylan also expressed ways his office can address deportation outside of the treaty negotiations. This discussion is certainly one of our office priorities and includes having discussions with federal executive offices to see if a process can be established without the need of legislation or language in a treaty. I can tell you the answer to that question right now. You don't need legislation. You don't need a treaty. You're trying to invent something that was invented long ago. The wheel. It fits on an axle. It rolls. The ICE folks will deport aliens who have been convicted of a certain set of serious crimes once their prison term is over. I had personal experience with this back when I was Director of Corrections. It was something that was already in place and apparently been in place ever since. And the way it worked was we had a warden, and he was in communication with the guy at what was then called Immigration and Naturalization Service, it was the U.S. Marshal, a deputy U.S. Marshal named Phil something, and I'll probably remember his name next week. So these guys were in constant communication. So when an alien near the end of his term, if he had been convicted of serious crimes, these guys would get on the phone. And the deputy marshal would send something called a detainer to the warden, which meant, let us know the exact time this guy's getting out, because we'll be there to slap cuffs on him. Now, the way it often works is this. The person, the alien at that particular point in time stops being an inmate of the Department of Corrections. Some papers are filled out and signed, etc., and becomes a federal detainee who is housed at the Department of Corrections pursuant to a contract between the Bureau of Prisons, United States Bureau of Prisons, and the government of Guam. And when the arrangements are made to put him on a plane to send him back where he came from, that's what happens. It doesn't require someone standing out in front of the Department of Corrections with a baton directing it as though it's the Philadelphia Symphony Orchestra. It just happens. Now, this got really confused during the Calvo administration because apparently the Director of Corrections or the governor or both of them at the time didn't know what I'm talking about. And what happened was Governor Calvo invented a sort of quasi-deportation. And what he did was, for I think 3 inmates, he commuted the sentences to time served and released these people on a sort of a parole that said that they would be released from custody, but a condition of their quasi-parole was that they never come back to Guam. And if they ever came back to Guam, they would be arrested and put back into prison for the rest of their term. Questionable constitutionality. But, of course, the only way we'd ever find out the answer to that would be if one of these guys came back and we attempted to put him back in prison. But that only happened a few times. Now, of course, the disadvantage there is who's got to pay the fare back to the FSM or wherever the guy's going. We do. When a person is deported for violating, pursuant to the procedure I mentioned, if he attempts to come back to Guam, he is committing another federal crime. And we had a case just a couple of months ago where someone from the FSM tried to come back, was caught, was put in prison, was brought before the district court, was sentenced, and then deported again. So once a person is deported, we don't need to issue bench warrants or any of that kind of stuff, because the Immigration and Customs Enforcement will enforce the law on deportations and deportees. So the system's already there. It's just a matter of cooperation between prison officials and the U.S. Marshal's Office. Now, gets into something else here that is not the reinvention of the wheel. And this is somewhat different. And that, as Moylan said, he's looking at sorting out deportation details in cases that are in their early stages before the court. The other efforts that we're doing to identify prejudgment cases, in other words, people that haven't been found guilty. whether or not they want to take a plea agreement that would deport them. Well, if they take a plea agreement and plead guilty to a sufficient charge, then they're going to be deported. Now, plea agreement, there's a special dimension for aliens in plea agreements, and that is that the defendant in a plea agreement has to be informed in open court if his pleading guilty to a certain charge might cause his deportation. And if he's not informed, then his motion to set aside his sentence will be granted and he'll come right back. So that's how deportation fits into that. Now, I don't think there's any way for someone to plead guilty to a crime that's not on the deportable list and be deported. So once again, the stuff is already there. If a defendant wanted to plead guilty to a serious crime, then he's going to be deported. It doesn't have to be convicted, because in the eyes of the law, a guilty plea and a sentence based on a guilty plea is the same as a conviction. So all of this stuff is already there. Now, the whole plea agreement thing is something that Doug Moylan's prosecutors would have a handle on. And I suppose the emphasis would be we don't enter into plea agreements for anything less than a deportable crime when we're dealing with aliens. I suppose that would be the benchmark. Now, people from the FSM are a particular kind of alien. There are basically two categories of aliens. There are permanent resident aliens and non-immigrant aliens. A permanent resident alien is someone who comes here on a visa quota, someone who comes here on someone who is the spouse of an American citizen and is able to achieve permanent residence that way. A permanent resident is eligible for naturalization. A permanent resident can become a United States citizen. And other than voting, there's not a whole lot of difference between a permanent resident and a United States citizen. A non-immigrant alien is a totally different breed of cat, so to speak. Non-immigrant aliens are like people that come to Guam as intra-company transferees, H visa workers. Their stay is temporary. And in order for them to be granted those visas, they have to convince a State Department official that they do not have immigrant intent, that they do not intend to stay here forever. So those are non-immigrant aliens, student visas, all of those kinds of visas. You can't go from that visa to a permanent residence. So those are the two major categories. Now we have something totally different when it comes to people who are citizens of any of the three freely associated states. They don't come to the United States as permanent residents, although they can stay here indefinitely. People from the freely associated states are called habitual residents. And that's what was negotiated in the three compacts of free association. Now, at least in theory, habitual residents should be going to school, getting medical care, or working, not laying under a coconut tree drinking beer. So, again, at least in theory, not doing those three things could result in deportation. I don't think the immigration folks and the marshal is going to get involved in that. So I think that the two Moylans got some earned media here, but I don't think it's going to yield a whole lot of fruit. They did not get a blue star from Tall Tales on this initiative. Okay, let's head for Wrigley Field, and we'll come back to Troy versus the Consigliere.
Wishing you a happy, healthy, and prosperous new year from your friends at Security Title. As we clean house for the new year, this is an excellent time to make sure the title to your land is also in order. It doesn't matter if you own a ranch in Inarajan, a house in Dedido, or a hotel in Tumon. Keeping the ownership clear promotes peace in the family and can avoid future misunderstandings. When it comes to your family property, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
So here we go. Troy versus the Consigliere. And Troy did a long piece in Candid News today dealing with some audit findings that BJ came up with. And I'm not going to go into the ones for the Northern Marianas, although they're pretty significant. Kind of make us look good by comparison, I suppose. And then there was also one about the Guam Cancer Trust Fund question cost, failure to collect gaming tax, and $40 million in losses on property and other taxes. Well, the Cancer Trust Fund distinguished itself again today by noticing up one of their meetings. And here's the agenda for their meeting. 1, call to order. 2, report from chair. 3, report from GCTF program manager. 4, old business. 5, new business. 6, open discussion and information. 7, adjournment. So if they can't even put together an agenda, what can we expect from them? And I'm just wondering if the governor is ever going to realize that this is her problem. She's supposed to be the leader of the executive branch. Okay, now for the Consigliere. Remember the controversy surrounding the procurement of the health insurance contract during the Calvo years? There remained $5 million in financial impact, according to the Guam audit, from the lack of verification of refunds in the GovGuam health insurance. More recently, the Leon Guerrero administration has done nothing to resolve $3 million in question costs from the 2021 audit of the alleged illegal sole source procurement of the Pacific Star as a quarantine facility. If you forgot, the 19th floor is located in the Pac Star Hotel. The procurement occurred under the direction of then Governor's legal counsel, Hai Huynh, and then Chief of Staff Tony Babauta. The Governor's legal counsel, her consigliere. The hotel that was discovered following the procurement had a multi-million-dollar note with the same bank the Governor's family owns. Not only had that multi-million, but the note was in default and the mortgage was in foreclosure procedures. Mr. Huynh, this consigliere, worked for that bank prior to his stint at Adelup and went back to work for the bank after he resigned as the Governor's legal counsel. Well, it's in the family, of course. Yeah. So here's what Troy says. Former Attorney General Levin Camacho decided not to investigate or prosecute following the audit findings. It's rumored Attorney General Douglas Moylan is investigating the matter. I don't see how anybody can just let this lay and not do anything with it. And of course, you know what happened. Levin sat on it for a year. He got some heat from the public auditor and from some senators. He came back with a really snotty, first he filed his suit for so-called declaratory judgment. Then he came back with a real snotty release slamming senators and BJ and kind of saying, see, I did something. But he did absolutely nothing. He sued 4 contracts. No case or controversy, no defendant. It was just basically an exercise to show that the governor had not done anything wrong. And when I read this, I decided that I needed to do something about it. So I filed a motion for leave to file an amicus brief. And that motion was granted about 10 days ago. So counsel has already filed my amicus brief. Well, I think he's filed. He's ready to file with the Superior Court and laying out all of these things that the attorney, once again, it's a classic Tall Tales episode because it's not what Levin Camacho did. It's what he didn't do. So let's hope that Doug picks up on this one because there certainly seems to me like there's something there. Okay, next we have won't versus liability. And somebody here in Facebook comments said they wanted to hear my take on the bill to expand the so-called Castle Doctrine. And this is a story that ran in the Daily News. Residents would be allowed to defend themselves with deadly force in their yard, outdoor kitchen, or bathroom, driveway, and other spaces around their house, and have no duty to first try and run away should a bill introduced Tuesday become law. It's not quite that simple. Guam law already provides for the Castle Doctrine, allowing people to defend themselves inside their home or vehicle. Freshman Senator Will Parkinson's Bill 39 would expand that doctrine to curtilage, C-U-R-T-I-L-A-G-E. Now, curtilage is not a part of your knee that you could injure if you're tackle playing football.
Unless you're from Georgia.
Unless you're from Georgia, yeah. And then the article says expand the curtilage to outdoor areas and other structures immediately adjacent to a person's home. Now, if any of this ever goes to court, curtilage, the definition of curtilage is going to be something that is going to get a lot of attention. And this is what curtilage means. Now, most of the jurisprudence on curtilage comes in cases dealing with the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. The Fourth Amendment says, the right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue except upon probable cause, etc. So it says people are to be secure in their persons, papers, effects, and houses. Well, the case law says someone's house. In other words, in order to search someone's house, you have to have a warrant signed by a judge. You have to convince the judge that there's probable cause that a crime was committed, and some of the fruits of the crime or evidence of the crime could be located with that search warrant. Well, in the Fourth Amendment jurisprudence holds that house includes the curtilage. Okay, so what is the curtilage? The U.S. Supreme Court held that for purposes of the Fourth Amendment, an area immediately surrounding a house or dwelling is curtilage. And that's a case called, and then there's a case called the United States versus Dunn. A curtilage question should be resolved with a particular reference to 4 factors. Now I have the 4 factors here. You have to find all 4 of these factors to determine that that area is curtilage. In Dunn, the court said that the location of a barn being 60 yards from the house and 50 yards outside of the fence which completely the home, encircled the home, suggested that it was outside the home's curtilage. Fence, barn. Barn outside of fence. Okay, so extrapolating a little bit here, you have a house, you've got a fence around your house, you got a shack or something like that, a carport, a garage outside the fence, maybe not the curtilage. Second factor, enclosure by fence. And Dunn said that although the area was surrounded by the fence, the home was surrounded by a different fence. And that fence was obviously intended to demark a specific area of land immediately adjacent to the house that is readily identifiable as part and parcel of the house. So in the Dunn case, you had the house, you had a fence, and then a larger fence. Only the first fence enclosed the curtilage. Third factor, nature of use. In Dunn, the court said that law enforcement officials had evidence that the area was not being used for intimate activities of the home. Namely, that it was being used to store large amounts of phenylacetic acid used in the illegal manufacture of drugs, and that it had a very strong smell. So what you use, let's say you have a fence, what you use the area inside that fence for will determine whether or not it's part of the curtilage. Fourth factor. Okay, in another case called, third factor, in another case called Jardines, the court specifically named a front porch as a prime example of curtilage. Even though Girl Scouts can knock on the front door, they must leave immediately if there's no answer. Fourth factor. In Dunn, the court said the area was not protected at all from observation by those standing in open fields. Although the agents did peer into a barn that was arguably protected by the Fourth Amendment, any such operation from open fields was not protected. And I mentioned this before in the show. A policeman's eye commits no trespass. If a cop is standing in a place where he has a right to be, and he can see into a window or an open door or whatever, right? And sometimes that can be the basis of a search warrant. In Jardines, the court noted that while police can stop a person on an open highway, they are prohibited from peering into the windows of a private home from the front porch, absent probable cause. So here's my curbstone advice. If this bill passes and you think it's something you really want to pay attention to, then you need to study up yourself and determine what is the curtilage of your house. Because if you take a pot shot at somebody and you're wrong, then you're in a heap of trouble. Okay, so going on with the article. And the article doesn't help much, and Wong doesn't help much here because of the way he explains the curtilage. Now, I'll go to the definition in the statute. In the statute, it said, curtilage means the area immediately surrounding a residence that is necessary, convenient, and habitually used for family purposes and for those activities associated with the sanctity of a person's home. Pretty hard to get your arms around what exactly that definition is talking about. Going on. In many cases, this is a quote from Won't. In many cases, curtilage is the first line of defense against intruders and is often the place where a homeowner will encounter an intruder before they reach the home itself. First line of defense. I don't know about that. Besides expanding the castle doctrine, it would also allow for the defendant in the case to call for a hearing where they can argue that they are immune from prosecution on the basis of self-defense. Those looking to overcome the defendant's claim would have to provide clear and convincing evidence that the act was not self-defense. According to the release, the provision was borrowed from Florida's Stand Your Ground law. Well, that's a good move on Wont's part. Now, Pete Scrow took a lot of flack from the pro-abortionists because he modeled our Heartbeat Act on the Texas Act. Well, the plain truth is this. A lawyer's never going to do original work if he can copy somebody else's.
See your previous story on the wheel.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, so if someone else has put all the time and thought into drafting a bill, it's a darn good place to start. And of course, if that bill has been around for a while, there will be judicial decisions construing the bill. So anybody who thinks he can draft complicated legislation as though he's doing a free verse is not the kind of guy you want to draft your statutes. San Augustine previously proposed Stand Your Ground legislation. The measure never passed after pushback from residents and members of the criminal justice system being used to justify violent crime. Parkinson's bill only extends the castle doctrine to areas surrounding a person's residence. Quote, people have a right to defend themselves on their property, whether it is in the home itself or outside areas of their property, including their yard, carport, outside. Now, you see, that's just not the law, because the law is, in the absence of castle doctrine protection, let's take an example. Someone has a machete and he's gesturing towards me. I can't reach in my pocket and pull out my snub-nosed .38 and drill him. I have to retreat. I should turn around and run. That's the law. You don't have a right to defend yourself in that kind of situation. Now, I'm going to go to that section of the statute. I've got somebody online here. Yeah, Louis, there's some more to this that I want to get into, but I do want to talk to you because I know you're very interested in this sort of thing. Now, Section 3 adds a new Section 7.113 to Title 9 of the Code, and it's entitled Immunity from Criminal Prosecution and Civil Action. This may be the most important part of this bill. And there's a definition for what criminal prosecution means. And it says a person who uses force as permitted by the statute is justified in using such force and is immune from criminal prosecution and civil actions for use of such force, except when the person against whom force was used is a law enforcement officer, etc. 2, the person using force knew or reasonably should have known that the person was a law enforcement officer. 3, the use of force is found to be unlawful or was found to have been exercised with any illegal activity. So if you're relying on this, if this becomes the law and you're relying on it, and you don't have a firearms ID, or your firearm is not registered, once again, you're SOL. A law enforcement agency shall use standard procedures for investigating the use of force as described, but the agency may not arrest the person for using force unless it determines that there is a probable cause that the force used was unlawful. So it can't be just a standard shooting, according to this bill. The court shall award reasonable attorney's fees, court costs, compensation for loss of income, and all expenses incurred by the defendant in defense of any civil action brought by a plaintiff if the court finds the defendant is immune from prosecution as provided in subsection B. Now, this contemplates a pretrial hearing. Now, when exactly that hearing should occur, I suppose, depends on the creativity of counsel. But I would suspect that after a person has been arraigned, that would be counsel's first move to file one of these in one of these immunity from prosecution hearings. That's pretty heavy duty, and of course, you can lead the court to water, but the horse makes the decision to drink. There may be some judicial hostility to this, and I suspect it's going to be really difficult to get this section through the legislature. Now, not only is there immunity from criminal prosecution, but listen to this. In a criminal prosecution, once a prima facie claim of self-defense immunity from criminal prosecution has been raised by the defendant at a pre-trial immunity hearing, the burden of clear and convincing evidence is on the jury seeking to overcome the immunity from criminal prosecution. Now, prima facie is even lower than substantial evidence. Prima facie means on its face. You know, just a little bit more than a scintilla. So if there's a prima facie case of the applicability of this law, then the burden shifts to the other party. The burden shifts to the prosecution, and he has to show by clear and convincing evidence that there was no immunity involved. Clear and convincing is the second highest standard of evidence. The statute also provides for immunity from civil prosecution, from civil liability. I marked that off here somewhere. Okay, so that's basically my take on what this law is all about. And I've got Louis on the line who will give me his take on the law. Go ahead, Louis.
Yeah, Bob. I make my comments from the standpoint of not having read the proposed bill.
You're in a perfect position, Louis.
So I don't know whether or not my comment.
You must be friends of a senator.
Is addressed.
You must be friends of a senator, because I think that tactic is used quite often on the floor of the legislature. It's much harder to pin somebody down if he doesn't know what he's talking about. But go ahead, Louis.
Understood.
You know, a part of the castle doctrine law that I often do not hear being referenced is the part that says it applies only if the intruder to the castle, i.e., the inside of the home, the business of the car, has done it both illegally and forcefully, or unlawfully and forcefully. So imagine the situation of someone's front yard. Let's say that there is no fence in the yard, and I think that's a reasonable assumption because the vast majority of domiciles on Guam and the United States do not have fences, okay?
I think the vast majority have stone walls, so Louis, but go on.
So the point is, even if someone had a sign, well, let's take the average home. If the average home does not have a sign saying no trespassing, then someone walking into a yard is doing it neither unlawfully nor forcefully. Therefore, unless there's some additional wording to the expanded castle doctrine law, it just wouldn't apply.
Seems right.
Now, let's say that there's a line that a sign that says no trespassing. But if there's no fence, I'm coming in. I might be doing it unlawfully because I'm trespassing, but I'm not doing it forcefully because there is no effort taken to walk across the lawn.
Understood.
So the point is, unless there's some additional language mitigating the requirement for both an unlawful and forceful entering into the premises of the yard or the garage or whatever, it occurs to me the expansion just wouldn't apply. And so what's really being accomplished? It would seem nothing.
Well, consider the definition of burglary. Burglary is the entry of a dwelling of another intending to commit a crime therein. So if a person walks across your front yard and he intends to go inside and steal your drugs or something like that, does that do it?
Well, I would offer if at the point of, use your hypothetical, someone walks into the yard and starts waving the machete menacingly.
Well, let's go back to burglary. You don't need a machete to commit burglary.
Yeah, but how do you show intention?
Well, that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is the question, and that's the question probably for some of the other things that you mentioned. If a person if he's waving a machete, it gets a little bit easier. But let's say that he's open carrying, and he comes into your yard, and he sees you, standing inside the door, and he starts hollering, threatening you. Does that count?
Well, according to current wording of castle doctrine, no, because there was no forceful entry to the yard.
The curtilage.
Yeah. Well, there was no.
Well, this whole forceful entry thing doesn't really fit into the curtilage dimension very much. I guess that's your point, huh?
That's my point. That unless there were, again, I haven't seen the bill, but just calling in, I heard about this is the first time I've heard about this bill for expansion of castle doctrine. The point is, unless there's language in the bill addressing the restriction of castle doctrine only applies if there's both forceful and unlawful entry, unless you got a 10-foot wall and no trespassing signs, I'm neither forcefully I'm not forcefully entering your yard when I walk across the lawn.
My first thought when I read this was that, having studied the Fourth Amendment, having learned the word curtilage a long, long time ago, is that's very important as far as criminal procedure is concerned in search and seizure. I thought that you could make a really good argument that the statute as worded would include curtilage, because the curtilage, according to the Fourth Amendment jurisprudence, is part of your house. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, read the statute, Louis, and call me back, and we'll talk about it a little bit more.
Sure thing. Sure. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not there is such an amended wording to address this issue. I'll see what I can find out tomorrow.
All right, Louis.
Sure thing. Yeah.
So let's head for Churchill Downs, Jose.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagatna location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
Attention investors, Century 21 Realty Management is proud to present an investment opportunity you have to look at. Ladera Towers Condominium provides luxury living centrally located in Manila with access to the entire island. Ladera Towers has 3-bedroom condominium units available now. See them before they're all gone. 4-bedroom units sold out. This investment is only going to appreciate in value. Call now, Century 21 Realty Management. The number is 647-5003, or visit laderatowerguam.com or guamproperties.com.
Okay, so we're just 5 minutes from bidding farewell to our esteemed president. And I might just start on DeSantis versus Disney. Ron DeSantis is the governor of Florida. I think he's every Republican's hero, except with only one exception. I don't want to mention Donald Trump's name, but I think you know who I mean. Yeah, he took a blue state and won re-election by 20 points, turned a blue state bright red. And he once again is one of these people that, as far as I'm concerned, he and I are pretty close together on our political thoughts and philosophies, etc. But he did something that kind of gets into my dislike for people who use the government's back scratcher to scratch their own backs. You probably remember he got into a real fight with Disneyland or Disney World, which is extremely important to the economy of Florida. And what happened here was when Walt Disney was deciding he wanted to build a park in Florida, he did it very surreptitiously. He set up a few dummy corporations to go in and buy real property. He didn't want anybody to know that Disney was interested because that would cause the prices to shoot up. He learned a hard lesson from Disneyland in California. He built Disneyland in California and found that the property adjacent to Disneyland became extremely valuable because of Disneyland. And of course, he didn't get any cut out of it at all. So he didn't want to make the same mistake. So he didn't want to just buy enough for the park. He wanted to buy a huge tract of land. So he bought all kinds of huge tracts of land anonymously. Nobody knew who was actually buying the land. It was Walt Disney. And then he got a law through the Florida legislature creating the Brushy Creek Improvement District. And the Brushy Creek Improvement District was a one-off for Florida. It was a special district created by law that had the same powers as a county. You know, they could have a sheriff, law enforcement, fire, all the rest of that stuff. And basically the Disney management was the county government. So Disney not only owned the park, he actually owned the government for the park, which was very advantageous for Disney. Well, when Disney came out, the new Disney, the woke Disney came out and started beating up on DeSantis because of his "Don't Say Gay" bill. Remember that? He shepherded a bill through the Florida legislature that said we don't teach sex education to kids in the first, second, and third grades. We'll come back to this tomorrow. Right now, I got to say goodbye to our president. Let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3, D3.
What did they shoot down and where did it come from? I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Senators who received a closed-door briefing from defense and intelligence officials yesterday about the unexplained aerial objects, saying the answer is, we don't know. Louisiana Senator John Kennedy says they did learn.
This has been going on for a long time. Hold on. At least 2017.
Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley.
I came out of that briefing thinking that nothing that they said added up, and so here's my conclusion. Either they're lying to us, which is very possible, considering that they lied about the Chinese spy balloon, or they're totally and completely incompetent, or maybe it's both.
Even some Democrat senators say the president needs to brief the country on what's going on, but White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre tells Fox News the president has nothing to share. The president did speak yesterday about the deaths of 3 students shot Monday night at Michigan State University.
It's a family's worst nightmare. It's happening far too often in this country, far too often. While we gather more information, there's one thing we do know to be true. We have to do something to stop gun violence ripping apart our communities.
It's been learned the gunman, Anthony McRae, was arrested on a weapons charge in 2019, but a prosecutor recommended a diversion program that reduced the gun charges to a misdemeanor. A new AP NORC poll finds public support for aid and arms to the Ukrainians on their fight against the Russian invasion is waning. 48% of those surveyed in favor of it, down 12% since May. Just back from Poland, California Democrat Congressman John Garamendi tells Fox News this is no time to back off.
Russia is losing. This fight is not over, and that is one of the major reasons that we were there, to make sure that the American equipment that is flowing into that area is actually getting to the front in a timely way.
President Biden plans to visit Poland next week. America is listening to Fox News.
Jason in the House, the Jason Chaffetz podcast. There is always someone doing something stupid somewhere. Dive deeper than the headlines and the party lines as I take on American life, politics, and entertainment. Join me, Jason Chaffetz, every Wednesday as I shed light on the news and make some predictions along the way. You never know who will drop in. Subscribe now on foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts.
Connect to Fox News Audio on the Fox News app. Listen to hear your favorite hosts like Brian Kilmeade, Jimmy Fallon, and Guy Benson standing up for what's right, live and via podcast. Just click listen, then swipe right and hear the latest news updates on your time. And scroll down to hear the latest podcasts